that to bend because of the moisture and atmosphere. Is that to design something is that you're asked to give meaning to something. Roughly, our studio is divided into like the 3 segments, and to us very important are the walls. The walls, on the walls you can see all the processes we are going through. We are, of course, a team of designers. We work with like 4 designers and some interns and freelancers, and we are multidisciplinary. Like we have a graphic designer, we have a new media designer, and we have a product designer, or like 3-dimensional designer. But we try to mix as much as possible to these disciplines to connect and come up with new concepts for anything you want. Our motto is that we don't specialize in anything unless we want to, and that's still a thing we firmly believe in. The main thing we do is create identity. We create identities for events, for brands, for anything actually. Just if you want an identity, we create it. But next to that, we also have our more like free researches and like free projects. We sometimes along the way, when you're working on a project, you come up with concepts that nobody is really asking for, but you still need to work it out. Yeah, because it's for designers, it's really hard to make something ugly because they want to control the outcome. They want to make something beautiful, but try to make something ugly once. It's great. You should do it, and it gives you a lot of new ideas because it's really important to break away from your own traditions as a designer, because you cannot make only beautiful stuff. And sometimes you make when you try to make something ugly 5 times in a row, you will end up making something beautiful without knowing it. So it's about this letting go of this control factor, because as a designer you tend to control everything in the process, and you need to let some luck in there. You know, you need to let to get some open ideas and open influences in there. That's why you should make ugly stuff as well. Also to get to know and to judge what is the meaning of something beautiful and what is the meaning of something ugly, because something ugly can be really beautiful as well. So what is this concept, you know? It's interesting. If you want to know what's out there and what people are doing, you spend an hour on the internet and you know what's out there. But on the other hand, it influences your subconsciousness somehow. I mean, when students come in here, like internships, and I ask them to do research for glass, what they will do, they go into this blogosphere and collect all these pictures from the designers who did something with glass. But that's not what I mean by research. I mean, that's the first thing. So I try to prevent interns to go and look in these blogospheres, because those are results, and I'm much more interested in behavior of glass, of meaning of glass. Some unexpected. It can be anything. I mean, it can come up with 100 pictures of wood that are maybe more interesting than glass. I mean, but if you can make a connection, then it's okay. So the blogosphere is, I don't know why it has become a major influence somehow. And it's of course, if you go to Milan, we had a few presentations in Milan. You get swarmed by journalists who have blogs. They are running blogs, and which is nice because it serves a kind of function for people who want to know what's up in the world of design. But as a designer, I don't find them interesting, because they really influence you, even if you don't think it does. Because at some point you make something, and then in the end I've seen this before, and then when you go back, you've seen it, but it's subconscious. You projected this idea and you thought that you had it yourself, but it was already there and you saw it just in a glimpse, and now it's in your work. There's 2 things that I've noticed during my career as a designer, is that you have the very young designers who have a kind of stardom, but after a while they also tend to disappear. And there's people who seem to be around for ages, and still come up with really strong works all the time. If I had a choice, I'd rather be the second, because these people are around for a long time and keep coming up with strong work. So to me, design is about this, not about a hit and then just fade out. You know, it happens a lot because it's also done by the media, because they don't underestimate the design media, because they create you as a superstar, they pick you up and then you're the big thing, and then up comes the next big thing, and you're gone. And you just forgot about to come up with the next good idea. So I tend to stay in the background and come up with good ideas all the time, and I don't like to listen to what other people find good ideas. I want to find it myself. I want to create it myself. I want to keep working on it, and try to be as independent as possible. So not being touched by his criticism or being put up as a next big thing or whatever. It's not sustainable. To get a grip of how a project goes, what happens here is this is a rough analysis of the briefing. Try to break it down into the important information, and from there we try to find our way through images or to text or to sketching. Try to get a grip of what actually could be the right shape or right design. So it's after like cutting through a jungle of images, we came up with a kind of drawn identity. So little small drawings. Here it's still all over the place, but here it starts to get into an identity of its own, and this is a kind of graphic corporate identity. This is a tableware that we designed for the moon. It's a project, research project for the longer staying on the moon, for people who are actually going to live there. It's a kind of project, also cooperation with a European Space Agency, and Alicia Farmis, who is a visual artist. And she invited about 10 designers to come up with concept ideas of products for the moon. And what we actually did, we create identity. So we were saying, okay, what is the identity of the moon? And compared to the identity of the Earth, there's a lot of, if you look at the identity of the Earth, there's a lot of nature, and in nature is a lot of symmetry, which is completely absent on the moon, because on the moon you only have a random impact, a random burst of energy. And what we actually try to recreate in the tableware is these kind of random bursts of energy visualized by glass for the burst and the crater for the impact. And why tableware? Well, we created tableware because from the diaries from the astronauts, we read that they mostly miss the table moment when they're in space. So we try to recreate a new table moment. Here we are working on a temporary hotel. This is a kind of hotel that's a kind of pop-up hotel which needs to be set up near festivals. So like for instance you have the Dutch Design Week or the Graphic Design Festival or Stripe Festival. These are all festivals which take more than a week. And this is a kind of container village that has hotel rooms. You can actually book online and just see where the hotel will be next time. Also, this is the first concept, and it's roughly based on the history of this region, like the old industrial structures or the old farmhouse structures. So the wood comes from there. The whole process is again in a book. And we started out not having any idea how it should look. The first name for this project was Guerrilla Hotel, because we somehow find a connection with this horse of this Trojan horse. We thought this kind of surprise element was really important. So what we actually did, we did a kind of research of what kind of material and shape and structure would actually fit this area. We actually worked together with students on this as well. The first proposals started out like this. So it's completely different, it's completely not realizable, but it was really interesting because they were like, what's already in these first tryouts was the very industrial look, the kind of iconographic industry, but also the churches and that kind of structures. So we tried to, going through this process, it ended up in this simplified structures. And we also, in the end, we start to like mix these icons of this area, like the factory, the churches, the farmhouses. And what happens here, you can already see that there's kind of structures on legs coming out of it. And from there we moved on, still not able to build this, but at some point we switched to this old wooden structures from farmhouses, because these connections are really nice, and they can still be found in structures like this. And from there we started working our way to something that's more suitable to build. So what we have now is a kind of the handwriting of this whole project is this wooden structures, and in there are some containers. They are not containers, they're not like the sea containers, but these are built containers, and inside these containers are living rooms, small living rooms. And what we want to do, every container has some mood board, but we want every city to have its own identity with the local designers. So we want to incorporate them into the project. It's just a nice thing to create something that is going to be built, which is really big. This is architecture. So as from graphic design, we ended up doing architecture as well. So it's a nice variation in our daily life. From a client point of view, client wants this. They don't want this because if you make a proposal, financial proposal, they say, don't need analysis, don't need research, I just want the product. And then you have a hard time to explain that is really important to go through, that you really need an analysis and really need the research to create a sustainable concept. I mean, it's about the sustainability of an idea as well. It's not a material that's just sustainable, but an idea can be sustainable as well. If you think too shallow about a concept, it will not sustain. If you look at it, you'll know somehow, even if you don't know, that there went a whole story before it, and that makes it stand out from the rest. I think that's the only reason to do it, but also the sustainable thing is because if you, like for instance, we do identities for a brand or a product. If you like do what the client says, like forget about the analysis and forget about the research, just make a logo. You just start out making a logo. Has no story, has no fundament. So you have maybe it looks nice, but it's not sustainable after like 2 years, because then you say, okay, maybe it was too much trend at that time to do it this way. So that's why you need this to build a foundation and the result will be something, I don't know what, but a shape without foundation has no meaning. I ran a studio for like 2 years, like really working on graphic design all the time. And after that I spent some time in the architecture, and there I noticed that people, architectural projects are like very big, and they are so used to work in teams that architects are much more aware that they, as an individual, you're not able to create these big projects. And I really find that really interesting, and I try to do the same, but not for architecture, but for what we do, create identity. So it helps to not specialize, because if you specialize, you get stuck in the same routines all the time, and it really gives a kind of homogeneous output. So some people are like really the designers that really have a kind of handwriting, and really kind of being asked by clients to do the same trick over and over again. I don't find that really interesting. Growing up in Holland, I really didn't have the feeling that there's a special approach to design. You only find out when you start to travel and see design approaches in other countries, and then you see, hey, there's something special going on. I think it's on one hand it's deeply rooted in the kind of post-industrial area, like the Stijl and the Mondriaan, and those guys did a lot of work. I think the education helps a lot, because especially Design Academy. I used to study Design Academy. I graduated there in 2000. But you only start to realize that there's something going on here, but much later, when you start comparing, or I don't know what it is. I think it's a kind of wave, because maybe now it's Dutch design, maybe in 20 years it's Japanese design, or Chinese, or whatever, can be from any part. I mean, if I look at what's going on in design overall, there's a design from certain countries also breathe a certain atmosphere. Like the German design has a very how do you say, straightforward and pretty industrial approach, really solid. I think here is, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, there's also a lot of experiment going on in the design. So not so the rigid, the Stijl period and the Mondriaan, and I even tend to attack it a bit sometimes, because everything, especially in graphic design, if you put everything straight, and it gets boring after a while. So we need also to reinvent our own occupation all the time. And that's also why we say we don't specialize in anything, because if you, like I say, if you specialize, you get stuck in the same pattern, and need to get off find a way out of these patterns all the time. I think the most important thing as a designer, I think you should show to people what you do. And if you show people what you do, you will get asked to do that for other projects as well. So what you see a lot is that people tend to show stuff that they did for others, and or for as a commission for some other company, and it has no identity. But if you put as much identity from or like let's try to phrase it in one sentence. I think you should show to people what you want to make. Then people will ask you to do that. Otherwise, you get asked to do all the stuff you don't want to do, and then a few years down the line, you will discover that you're only making stuff that you don't want to make. And that's the balance we try to find in the work. On one hand, we do a lot of free projects, like We have this, like I said, this group of Dutch virtuals, and it's not so much the products that come out of it, but it's also coming together, having meetings, talk about design and about have you heard about this, have you heard about that. It gives a lot of input, a lot of influences, and it really helps to keep your brains going. And it really helps also to get fresh new ideas. And if you don't work out the fresh ideas for yourself, then it will not be visible. So people will not ask you about it. We started all this process about thinking about how can we do a book for a chef, because the whole cooking book market is like very cliche, all the same, you know, a plate with some food on it. So we finally took about a year to work on this book. And what I did for this book, I asked if I could work one day in the kitchen, just to feel how it is to work in the kitchen of a restaurant. I never knew how that would feel. So I did that. I worked a day in the kitchen. I did the dessert. It was a nice experience, but that's the only way to feel how it really works and how the flow of energy is going around in this kitchen. And it's like compared to what we do, it's a kind of top sport. And I had a design problem. The people who are working there could not be shown in the picture, because by the time this book is like 3 years old, some of the people probably don't work there anymore. So then I came up with this concept to present them based on the roots in the kitchen. Altogether, this is also an identity, because we put it all together, and actually this is also a kind of identity for a restaurant. Could be an identity for a restaurant. Of course, it's not a logo, but it's an identity. But this is the first step in the idea of moving around in a space. And we tried to think about it a bit further, and then we said, okay, how can we find something that actually maps identities? And we tried that in a project during Dutch Design Week 2 years ago. We used insects to walk around in a certain area and let it create shapes. First geographical shapes. Later we started experimenting with alphabet and like typefaces. And so we did a logo also for an exhibition that we did in New York. And from there we started thinking about, hey, can we do this three-dimensional? Because we used one camera on top, and it could follow like all the insects walking around. And the funny thing is that, for instance, a beetle has a very different walking pattern than a cricket. Just for the crickets make every shape round because they have this wide tentacles. So when they move around a square object, it gets round corners. When you have a little beetle, it walks straight around the corner. It's able to do that because it doesn't have this wide tentacles. So it was really interesting. To us, it's more like a research. It's a laboratory kind of project. We make posters of it, and sometimes we sell those posters. But it's just a kind of way of thinking about how can movement be identity. Can movement be a product? Can movement be architecture? And then we did the chair, and the chair was very lo-fi. We just used 2 cameras from a PlayStation, and used a little plastic transparent model, and put an ant on it. So this was the first model in which the model was not really shaped really nicely, but it resembled a chair. We say, hey, that's nice. Now we need to do it big. And this is the second try, and this is this is now where we are. We try to cast this in aluminum. It's the next step. But we are still thinking about what we can do with it after that, you know. So You can actually see the ant walking, and why ants? Because ants are very territorial. They really, when you put them on some surface, they really start to map the surface. So they're really mapping the whole area and try to find a way off the model. So this is a mix of identity, it's a mix of architecture, and it's a mix of product maybe. And it's all just about movement. I don't know where this is going to end up. It's still going on. We're still thinking about what we can do with this. We are not so much aware that we are based in the Netherlands. You know, we are trying to be a studio in Eindhoven, which works as open structured as possible, because this is open structured. Anyone who walks into the studio can straight look into our minds what we are doing. And in that way we are open structured as well. We try to build connections to other agencies abroad as well. So I don't think the Dutch design is not that interesting. I think it's to me it's not interesting. Maybe other people try to label it as, hey, this is Dutch design. But there is a noticeable difference. I don't know why it is, but I think it's much more the open atmosphere of working, much more open dialogue, and maybe I think it's also because the Dutch people are compared to a lot of other cultures are very liberal, very outspoken. And I think that outspokenness also takes away the fear to do expressive work. And I don't know if Dutch design is the most expressive work, but in the context of the post-industrial area, it is outspoken, because we get rid of all the how do you say, all the decoration, all the decorative stuff. We don't like decorative stuff, but we turned it in new kinds of, maybe new ways of decorating. I don't know. This is maybe also a decorative chair, but not based on the decoration from some areas. You know, a lot of design ideas are just recycling old ideas into something that looks new, but is not new. This wood was actually excavated in the center of Eindhoven. It's roughly 600 years old, and it used to be the fundament of the entrance to the city. It was a kind of bridge with a tower, and it used to be burned down by some evil people in the Middle Ages. After the excavation, we were able to get the wood from the archaeologists, and we decided to make new products out of it with a collective of designers called Dutch Virtuals. The Dutch Virtuals are like 9 is roughly it's like a, how shall I say, it's a collective. So it's just 9 different designers who worked with this material, and some of the results. So these 9 designers, they all worked with this material and created new objects, like for instance a table. Some designers created paper out of it. Some other designer made some time instruments. And what we did, we created a kind of living creature, because all the designers were like fighting with the structure of the material, because it starts to break up, it starts to bend because of the moisture and atmosphere. But we use that energy that's still in the material to let the material do some drawing. So we have it here. Here you see some images of the excavation, and these are actually the poles which are lying there. And we decided to use the material as it is and just put it on pencils, and then let the material do its work, and it starts making these drawings. So yeah, it's a kind of design, but some people call it art. We don't know. We don't specialize in anything. It's a kind of think that the process is mostly more interesting than the outcome. You know, when you're going through a process and there's a final solution, like kind of fixed outcome, then it's kind of a dead end somehow. So this, in that way, the process is never over, and the process keeps continuing. And in that way, the framework, I recognize the description. You know, if you ask this question to people who are looking are bystanders, they will probably give you a more clear answer than you were right in the middle of it, because we are in it, and it's really difficult to see what we actually how these processes go and where they end up. But if you say is design an evolutionary process? Yes, it is. To me, it is. And I mean not the evolution. This ideas evolve to a next level and something else, and spin-offs of this idea end up in processes like this. So it's actually there's no one project just going on. It's like 5 or 6 different projects and all getting mixed up, and it's learning all the time. It's never stop learning. You know, like one thing is which is really important to get a space. So it's easy to notice that we have a very nice space, but it's also really important for the way we work. To really generate ideas, you need space, you need room to try stuff out. So one day we are working in the computer, the other day we are like building stuff and building a photo studio or whatever. The walls to us are important to open the processes that are going on. They're like analog open source. So anyone is able to put his knowledge into these processes. And this says also about something about the projects. Depending on the amount of projects we are doing, we try to create little teams, and where a lot of and then have dialogue. And the walls help to have a dialogue about the process. Of course, the mixing of the different disciplines. For instance, to mix graphic design with new media design, and to have a spatial designer intervene these processes to come up to try to kind of get a disruptive pattern into your projects, which gives new insights into the process. And the wall really helps for the dialogue. So to have a dialogue on the wall, we have like every week. We have on Tuesday we have a presentation morning, which is something that is really structural, and everyone presents their projects, and it helps a lot because you have to rethink, okay, what am I going to present, and then the people will come and look and also react. Hey, maybe it's easier to do this way or this way. So there's there's a really valuable input. One other thing is that we document all processes. So mostly when you start a project, you have like maybe 10 rough ideas of what it could do, or where it could go, and in the end you will end up with one chosen idea. But that doesn't mean those other 10 ideas are not interesting. They just weren't chosen. So there's a lot of rich ideas in processes, and we try to document those, and also try to keep them alive in maybe for other projects or whatever. Try to work on that. So also the learning part is again very important. So we try to, as a team, learn from each other, because I learn every day from these designers, and I hope they learn from me, and the other way around. So it's a constant dialogue. I think dialogue is very important. So and not being afraid to let go of your safe path. You know, like normally, if you work for a long time in a certain studio, people tend to get into the same route from A to Z. You know, after a while, you start to know your tricks, and but it's good to try to let go of those safe paths and discover some new areas. What is an interesting thing is the whole blogosphere right now. You know, everyone sees what's going on there. Has two sides. One side is that when you do something and you put it out there, everyone sees it and it goes from. So you're as a young designer, you're able to with one image you can change the world. Let's say like that. And but the other side is that it will be copied straight away, and it will be critique will be relentless. You know, how do you call this? It will be shut down immediately. You know, it's when you the critiques are mostly not so nice. If you let yourself influence by those things, don't go there, because it doesn't bring anything. The only thing is it's easier as a young designer to get seen, to get out and get an idea out there. But some ideas at first glance look interesting, but if you look better, the ideas are weak. But it's kind of the effect that the blogosphere and the whole internet has back on design is not so good, because it creates this holistic, this hollow, good-looking stuff which has no foundation. And that's the worry you should have about this whole thing. So don't put your energy in blogs and stuff like that. Put it in working on the good stuff, you know, the strong stuff. And the design is, and that's my personal thought, is that to design something is that you're asked to give meaning to something. And so maybe to design a product is to give meaning to a product, or to give meaning to an identity, or to give meaning to something. And I think that's a very important job, something that you because in that saying that design is to give meaning to something, it gives you that's a kind of creationalist thinking, you know, like it's like you're creating the meaning of life, you know. So it's but it's interesting. I mean, the drive that you have to be a designer and to come up with new concepts and new ideas is mostly to provide meaning for people. So that's one thing they do every day, and in a certain way, and you change something in that context, and then their life gets a little better. I don't know, but it at least has more context, more meaning.